After the chaos that led to the fall of the Eastern Han Dynasty, which we've covered in the previous video of this series, China remained divided during the Three Kingdoms period from 220 to 280. It unified briefly under the Western Jin Dynasty for 2 decades in the 280s and 290s, but fell apart again due to the War of the Eight Princes and the invasion of the Five Barbarians. There is a very distinct flavor to this period of Chinese history. Politically, it was a very dark century filled with political intrigue and ineffectual government. Culturally, it was dominated by a pessimistic, somewhat nihilistic view towards life. It was a transitionary period in Chinese history during which many older norms fell away and newer ones were only starting to emerge. This video covers the first half of this period from 220 to 280, with a focus on the main political events of this period. The next video will cover the events leading up to the fall of the Western Jin Dynasty in 316, along with the major social changes that took place in China during this time. In 220, Cao Pi, who ruled northern China, usurped the throne of the Han Dynasty and established the Wei Dynasty, known as the Cao Wei Dynasty, to distinguish it from later dynasties also named Wei. Soon afterwards, the warlord Liu Bei, who was a distant member of the Han imperial family, re-established the Han Dynasty in the southwest. This is known in history as Shu Han, with Shu being the geographical name of the region around modern-day Sichuan province where it is based. Now Emperor, Liu Bei decided to invade the warlord Sun Quan, who had backstabbed him a few years prior. Although revenge was very much on the table, the invasion was also born partially out of necessity. Back around 207, when Liu Bei was still a minor warlord, he was joined by Zhuge Liang, a brilliant scholar who assisted him in every step of his subsequent rise. Early in their working relationship, Zhuge Liang had outlined for Liu Bei a grand strategy to take over China. First control Jing province in south-central China, then control Yi province in southwestern China, and then launch a two-pronged attack northward. A western attack through the Qin Mountains into the Wei River Valley around Chang'an, and an eastern attack from Xiangyang into the Central Plains. Liu Bei worked steadily towards this objective over the next decade, but just as this plan was coming to fruition in 219 when his army besieged Xiangyang, Sun Quan made a secret alliance with the north and conquered Liu Bei's portion of Jing province. Without Jing province, Liu Bei was hemmed into the mountains of the southwest, with his only remaining northward invasion route through the difficult Qin mountain passages. In 221, Liu Bei personally led the 50,000-strong Shu Han army out of the Three Gorges in full pomp, but was soon blockaded from entering the open plains by Sun Quan's defending army, and decisively defeated at the Battle of Yiling a year later. Liu Bei fled home and died of illness in 223. On his deathbed, he entrusted the care of his teenage son Liu Shan to Zhuge Liang, who now controlled the government of Shu Han. Zhuge Liang inherited a complete mess. The bulk of the Shu Han army had been destroyed. The Shu Han economy had been devastated by war. The local nobility resented Shu Han rule, and indigenous tribes in the far south rebelled. Shu Han was expected to fail. And yet, through sheer hard work and talent, Zhuge Liang quickly stabilized the bureaucracy and promoted a number of capable subordinates, rebuilt the economy and army, re-established Shu Han's diplomatic ties with Sun Quan, and defeated the rebellious tribes in the south. Also around this time, in 229, Sun Quan declared himself emperor of the state of Wu, known in history as either Eastern Wu or Sun Wu. Now with internal affairs in place, Zhuge Liang set about his final objective, invading the north. This was an absurdly difficult task. Not only did Cao Wei control the vast majority of the Chinese population and economy, but even just keeping an army supplied through the Qin Mountains was already a Herculean feat. And yet between 228 and 234, Zhuge Liang proactively launched not one, not two, but 5 northern expeditions. These expeditions represent rare situations in history where a weaker side, instead of staying on the defensive, proactively attacked a much stronger side. But really, Shu Han had no choice. Since Cao Wei was many times more populated than Shu Han, the resource gap between the two sides will only grow with time as Cao Wei recovered from war, until eventually tiny Shu Han will be easily crushed by the sheer might of Cao Wei. Additionally, Shu Han was founded on the premise of re-establishing the Han Dynasty from the usurper in the north, and so if it were to remain content to hide in the southwestern mountains to await its inevitable demise, then it would lose its purpose for existing in the first place. And as arduous as going on the offensive may have been, upsets could still happen, and if lucky, the Shu Han army could still create something out of very little. This principled idealism against heavy odds is a big reason why Shu Han, despite being a small regional state, has been so highly regarded for much of Chinese history. It is also a big reason why people like Liu Bei and Zhuge Liang, who were ultimately just local players during a chaotic period in Chinese history, remain so famous to this day. The northern expeditions ultimately failed, but at times got very close to achieving their strategic goals of biting off a large chunk of the Cao Wei borderlands. During the final two expeditions, Zhuge Liang faced off against Sima Yi, who himself was a highly accomplished general. But even then, instead of engaging the weaker Shu Han army in open battle, Sima Yi usually chose to avoid battle, waiting for the overextended Shu Han supply lines to break. Such was Zhuge Liang's reputation as a military commander. In 234, during his final northern expedition, Zhuge Liang's health suddenly failed, and he died in camp at only 53 years old. Zhuge Liang is one of the most famous historical figures in Chinese culture, largely thanks to the novel The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. The novel portrays him as a superhuman genius with near-magical skills, and yet the real Zhuge Liang was perhaps even more remarkable than his fictional counterpart, because in one person he combined the skills of a top general, politician, administrator, and scholar, all while maintaining the highest levels of personal integrity. He has entered the Chinese consciousness as the paragon of loyalty, heroism, and the fulfillment of duty against all odds. A more pragmatic politician may have held back on the northern expeditions, but it was the duty of the Shu Han state to restore the Han Dynasty, and so Zhuge Liang launched the expeditions anyway. A more self-serving politician may have seized power for himself, but it was a duty of Zhuge Liang to remain loyal to his emperor, and so he did. From almost immediately after his death to the present day, Zhuge Liang has been held as the ideal of what a leader should aspire to be. After the death of Zhuge Liang, Shu Han largely held back on the northern expeditions as a focus on economic recovery. In the 250s, Zhuge Liang's protege Jiang Wei again led multiple northern expeditions, but these again went nowhere. Meanwhile, in eastern Wu, Sun Quan enjoyed a long reign and died in 252 at the ripe old age of 70. During his reign, eastern Wu and Cao Wei fought many border wars against one another, although all of them ended in stalemate. Towards the end of his reign, eastern Wu was beset by palace intrigues, with a factionalism continuing for over a decade after Sun Quan's death, significantly draining eastern Wu of its strength. Now moving to the north in Cao Wei, its first emperor, Cao Pi, died in 226, and his successor Cao Rui, who was the target of Zhuge Liang's northern expeditions, ruled until 239. Cao Rui died fairly young and left behind an 8-year-old son, Cao Fang, to succeed the throne, with regency powers entrusted to Cao Shuang, a close member of the imperial family, and Sima Yi. Over the next few years, Cao Shuang gradually stripped away Sima Yi's power, and Sima Yi resorted to hiding in his house, pretending to be very sick. Falsely believing that his rival was near death, Cao Shuang became increasingly complacent. In 249, Cao Shuang, along with his inner circle and the emperor, left the capital city at Luoyang to pay respect to the deceased Cao Wei emperors at the nearby Gaoping tombs. Sima Yi, with the help of his two sons, Sima Shi and Sima Zhao, staged a coup and seized control of Luoyang. When the news reached Cao Shuang, one of his closest advisors advised him to immediately evacuate to nearby Xuchang with the emperor and then gather an army to retake Luoyang. But Cao Shuang, not wanting to take risks, accepted Sima Yi's offer of surrender in exchange for his personal safety, in part because Sima Yi had sworn an oath to the goddess of the nearby Luo River that he would keep his word. In those days, an oath like that was still considered a very big deal. But after surrendering, Cao Shuang was soon put under house arrest and then sometime later was accused of treason and executed along with his immediate family. Sima Yi, the oath breaker, died of old age a few years later in 251, and his elder son Sima Shi took over power. He was a talented, ruthless politician who crushed anyone that stood in his path, and went as far as deposing the emperor in 254 and installing a different puppet emperor, Cao Mao, onto the throne. That same year, the garrison at Shouchun on the southeastern frontier rebelled with the support of Eastern Wu, and to stabilize the situation, Sima Shi personally led an army to the front line. At the time, he was suffering from a tumor growing next to one of his eyes and had to undergo surgery for it. The stress of campaigning contributed to complications developing at the surgical site, and so even though the rebellion was destroyed, Sima Shi died in 255 en route to Luoyang. After the death of Sima Shi, power passed to his younger brother Sima Zhao, who continued his brother's policy of dominating the court. Although the emperor Cao Mao was only 19 years old, he grew increasingly unhappy with the situation. In 260, he met with several ministers and angrily told them how much he was fed up with Sima Zhao's personal ambitions, and after that he gathered a few hundred members of his entourage and marched onto Sima Zhao's residence, making as much ruckus as possible along the way. They encountered a band of Sima Zhao's soldiers led by Jia Chong, one of Sima Zhao's closest advisors, at which point the emperor personally led a charge with his sword. Sima Zhao's soldiers were stunned by the development, and one of the officers, Cheng Ji, asked Jia Chong what to do. Jia Chong gave a very vague response. "You have been supported for so long to prepare for a day like today. You do not need to ask me for instructions." Cheng Ji somehow understood this to mean that he had a license to kill, so he charged forward and thrust his spear into the emperor's chest, killing him instantly. The entire event was rather absurd, although one common explanation was that the emperor knew it would only be a matter of time before Sima Zhao were to depose him, and rather than living out the rest of his life as a deposed monarch, he decided to publicly lead a suicide attack to destroy Sima Zhao's reputation. If this really was his objective, then he succeeded in the best way possible. In the very long course of Chinese history, it was common for powerful politicians to bully their emperors or to assassinate them, but all this had to be done in private. And here was Sima Zhao, murdering the emperor in broad daylight for all of China to see. Sima Zhao was absolutely horrified by what his subordinates had done in his name. He probably thought to himself, "Couldn't you have just captured the emperor so that I can declare him insane, depose him, and then pretend he dies of natural causes sometime later?" Cheng Ji was scapegoated for the incident and executed along with his entire family, although others who were clearly involved, including Jia Chong, were cleared of responsibilities. Sima Zhao installed another puppet emperor onto the throne, but the damage to his reputation was already done. In part to divert attention from all of this, Sima Zhao decided to invade Shu Han. In 263, a large army under the command of a talented general named Zhong Hui easily conquered Hanzhong commandery, and the Shu Han army under Jiang Wei retreated to the mountain pass at Jiange. Another Cao Wei general, Deng Ai, led an army of 30,000 through almost 400 kilometers of minimally charted mountain paths to circumvent the main Shu Han defenses. It easily defeated the unprepared Shu Han garrison and then marched on to Chengdu. Emperor Liu Shan, who had been ruling for 40 years by then, surrendered without a fight. Jiang Wei, with nothing left to fight for, surrendered to Zhong Hui. After the victory, infighting emerged between Zhong Hui and Deng Ai, who was falsely accused of treason, arrested, sent as prisoner to the capital, and murdered by his enemies along the way. Zhong Hui was now the sole commander of a massive army in the southwest. His ambitions grew, and he planned to rebel with the help of the newly surrendered Jiang Wei, who still harbored dreams of restoring Shu Han. But before their plot could materialize, a rumor began to spread in the Cao Wei camp that the two were planning to execute the officers who would not go along with the revolt. A riot broke out, and both Zhong Hui and Jiang Wei were killed. Their deaths marked the final nail in the coffin of the Han Dynasty. After the conquest of Shu Han, Sima Zhao was promoted to the Prince of Jin, and it was expected that he would soon usurp the throne. However, he died in 265, and his son, Sima Yan, took power and immediately usurped the throne in 266, establishing the Jin Dynasty. The Jin Dynasty ruled from 266 to 420 and was divided into two halves by historians: the Western Jin Dynasty until 316, and the Eastern Jin Dynasty from 317 to 420. One of the existential challenges that faced the Jin Dynasty from the very beginning was the lack of political legitimacy due to the treacherous ways it seized power, such as betraying the previous emperor's trust, breaking oaths, and especially murdering the sitting emperor in cold blood. Several generations after the founding of the Jin Dynasty, as the dynasty teetered on the verge of collapse, the sitting emperor asked a minister to tell him the story of how the Sima family came to power. When the narrative got to the murder of Emperor Cao Mao, the Jin emperor covered his face in horror and said, "If all these things really did happen, then this dynasty cannot survive long." This is the essence of the traditional narrative regarding the Jin Dynasty, which can be quite moralistic, and there were certainly broader socioeconomic factors that contributed to its rapid collapse. But nonetheless, the lack of political legitimacy did handicap the early leaders of the Sima family, forcing their hands into making a series of poor political decisions which contributed to the dynasty's downfall. But despite all of its problems, the Western Jin dynasty still accomplished one major feat: the conquest of Eastern Wu and the unification of China. In 264, Sun Hao became the emperor of Eastern Wu. He was a notorious tyrant, and conquest by the north increasingly seemed like an inevitability. Throughout the decade of the 270s, Wang Jun, a general stationed in the southwest, secretly built warships to prepare for an invasion. Massive amounts of wooden chips floated down the river, suggesting to Eastern Wu that an invasion was coming. In response, the Eastern Wu defenders hung thick iron chains across the Yangtze River near the exit to the Three Gorges to stop the northern ships. The attack finally came in the winter of 279 from multiple fronts, with the main thrust coming from Wang Jun in the west. When his giant warships encountered the iron chains, Wang Jun first sent rafts carrying soldiers to dislodge the chains from the supporting wooden planks planted into the river, and then placed large torches in front of his warships to burn the chains. With the chains out of the way, Wang Jun's fleet sailed virtually unopposed down the entire length of the Yangtze River. When the fleet reached the Eastern Wu capital at Jianye, modern-day Nanjing, Sun Hao surrendered without a fight. China was again unified after the collapse at the end of the Han Dynasty had led to nearly a century of division. But this time, it would remain unified for barely 2 decades before things fell apart again, in an even more catastrophic collapse than the previous one. But all these events will be for the next video.